We are Group 3, and I'm Caston,
I'm Richard.
I'm Krishna.
and we are Shikanet. All right, so our group set out to go ahead and make a message summarization app where we can intelligently query through chat histories that we've had with friends and things like that to both retrieve things like relative to current dates if we wanted to go ahead and say, hey, what have we been doing recently, but also go ahead and do specific queries for like what shows have we discussed or other types of information that we've discussed with other users. So the motivation for this is that right now a lot of messaging apps like Discord, they lack this feature. Discord will literally just basically control F on the page and try to find messages that include what word you want. And also we want to go ahead and figure out possibly like other funny messages that we go through and find. One situation that we encountered while we were working on this app was that large language models will typically parse a message and then treat it literally. In this case, our friend Richard over here, SS Spade, made the joke that he voted for Trump down here at the bottom, and the chatbot decided that that's exactly what he did, and then took it and flew away and decided that every single evaluation metric that we should have should be based around this prompt. And so what we did is we wanted to analyze the content, and then we wanted to go ahead and retrieve relevant messages. And then we also wanted to go ahead and have some way of looking at the documents that we were getting back. And before we go ahead and output an answer, see if those actually match up with the question or prompt that we got back first. So I'll let Richard go ahead and talk about the tech stack a little bit here.
Yeah, so the tech stack was, I guess, straightforward for the most part. So for the front end, we just simply worked in Flutter, which is a framework created by Google. It's pretty useful because it allows for development on both iOS and Android. For integration, we use Flask to communicate between front end and back end. I'll hand it over to Caston and Krishna for the back end.
Yeah, so I guess for the back end starting out, we experimented around with LangChain a little bit, which allowed us to go ahead and use multiple models and then different RAG techniques, which we explored. And then we tried out a number of different large language models as well, starting locally, and then we eventually just settled on using Gemini because they gave us $300 in credit.
All right, and then, oh yeah, we should mention Timescale. Timescale is a vector retrieval database system, and not only do you have access to a message or any string you want, you can put the embedding, and that gets searched as a database, but you also get time as a feature. And so that means that you can do custom queries like, in January 2025, what all did I do? And it will know how to query such that you get docs that are relevant to what you asked, as well as within the time bounds. And so in order to communicate between these two, we're using Flask. And so that's basically just HTTP requests to make sure we get all the content from the front end that the user specified, as well as the user's prompt, as well as our database system.
Sweet. Awesome. And then going for the app overview.
Yeah, so from a brief overview, so basically the core functionalities that our app allows users to search through past conversation histories via our in-app agent. It can summarize recent activities, which you might have seen on the title screen. There's a shortcut menu for that. You can try asking different types of questions, like very specific, or rather context-specific questions. And you can also try asking more general questions, and maybe questions related to relative terms in terms of time. Like, for example, where did we go eat out recently, as an example? And because I got a little bit carried away, there's other functionality in the core app itself, which I'll demonstrate in just a moment, maybe perhaps a bit more briefly. But these include adding, deleting, editing friend profiles. So you can imagine a friend is like a profile you create for someone else, so that the app agent can take that information and use that to enhance its search and be able to provide a more accurate answer. And then there's other things like app settings, which are miscellaneous, so I won't go into those too deeply.
Sweet. And then jumping in here, we needed some form of evaluation as well. The evaluation metrics that we used were all based around just using large language models for prompting. We first started out by manually creating a bunch of questions that we were going to evaluate on. However, it turns out that it takes a human a long time to write these questions and then go and try and find the answers to them. So instead of doing that, we fed our chat history into a model, and then using structured output, we created a JSON file of questions, an answer, and then the documents that it used to create that answer. And originally we started out by creating it with really specific queries because our model was just using a simple RAG technique using a vector database that would try and find the most similar embeddings just using cosine similarity. And so it would only retrieve like the top couple documents and then try and use that to answer the question. However, as we'll go into in a moment, we wound up with a different technique that made these specific questions not as great and our evaluation metrics a little bit better for one of our earlier models rather than our later one. But anyway, once we got those evaluations set up with questions and answers, we went ahead and prompted whatever our current model was with them, took those model responses, and then looked at the ground truth answer and compared them. And then we had like a little rubric, which we tested out a variety of different ones. We started with like a 1 through 10 scale. This was way too broad. I narrowed it down to a 1 through 5 scale, still too broad. Narrowed it down to a 1 through 3 scale, and then used a multi-shot query with several examples, which I didn't list all up there, and it's kind of in small text. However, this just gave it examples of when, like what to score. So like an example of a couple of 3 ratings, 2 ratings, and 1 ratings. Which could easily be parsed by a human as well, where if you see something, it's easy to tell, oh, this is a 1 because it just straight up doesn't answer the question, or oh, this is a 2 because it gives me, it doesn't give me incorrect information, but it also doesn't give me all of the correct information, or this is a 3 because it's just perfect, that gets the ground truth answer. And anyway, going ahead and evaluating this on a couple of different things we tried out. Originally, we used LangChain's multi-query functionality, which basically will take in whatever the prompt the user gives and try to create a bunch of different queries, query for those documents, take the intersection of all the different unique documents that it gets back, and then attempt to answer the question based on those. And then our later technique that we used was semantic chunking, which I'll let Krishna explain in a little bit here, as that one's kind of interesting. However, this didn't work well for the specific examples because part of it uses a self-query technique that actually tries to write like almost like a SQL query, except it's for our vector database. However, it doesn't parse the date information correct, and as a lot of the specific questions had date times in them, it would wind up giving errors, which in turn caused the evaluation scores to be a lot lower. And one other thing that I wanted to quickly note at the end is as we were creating these as specific examples, a larger context was something that we should have added into this, which we could do by summarizing messages so that they take up less tokens when we prompt our model. As originally, I was eating almost $1 at a time doing this. And I'll go ahead and quickly make sure that I believe our audio. Let's see here.
Oh, I might need
How do I check?
to. It's on the.
Is that the correct speaker?
Yeah.
Okay, sweet. Slideshow.
Oh
So we have like a quick little demo video that we shot before because we remembered that we needed one of those. Richard still got the mic on from when we recorded it.
Hey, Richard, where can we go later? There's an hour for that. Let's go. Our best conversation now. Sorry, new search. Let's search. Where can we go, Cart? In Seattle.
Wait, hold on.
Unfortunately, our app takes some time to process searches, but eventually there we go. Based on the conversation, we cards okay, yada yada, but you're more interested in the details page. You might be wondering to yourself, how did we get here? Well, if you take a look at the snippets, we can see exactly where the conversation message histories don't use apply to the app. that the LLM was able to get the answers back. And you see that based on this particular snippet, it's from WhatsApp and chat from WhatsApp movies. You see some messages here, and the bold text down here is actually where the relevant context was used to answer this question. Wow, thanks, Richard.
So we'll do a live demo as well, don't worry, but we got our little minute video in there.
Was that the PGP card in that text?
Yes.
Okay, yes, I promise that this is not all our app has to offer, but let's go into the live demo.
Yay!
Okay. Oh, that's actually on screen. That's good. Okay. Okay. So again, this is the home view. I'm not going to go into that very deeply. I'm going to skip. Well, sorry. I'm not going to skip over the other features. I'm just going to go through them very quickly for the sake of time. So let's start off in the settings menu. Okay. So edit profile. Now, normally, this is where you would supply your own information to the app, so you can process queries of the form like I or we. So you can see we have a few fields here for first name, last name, some social media identification like Discord ID. Yes, there is validation, but again, I'm going to go over this pretty quickly. So yes, I guess there is an appearance, which is actually pretty fun to play around with, but not the focus of this app. But I guess we can change it to something else. Okay, and history. Now, when I was designing this page, I was thinking about what an end user might want from the mobile app. So given that it is a chat app, maybe you have some features like pause search history, which I guess I won't, I won't demonstrate for now, but you can imagine that pauses your search history, clears search history. You get prompted for those things. The about page is just an explanation of the app, but let's go to something more important. How about friends? Fortunately, we don't have new, but we can very fortunately add a new friend. The only field we need is a name. I see Krishna to my right. We can also add notes if we want to for friends, so maybe you want to keep track of them, like in a traditional app that has friends, I guess. You can delete friends, you can edit your friend information too, and that's perfectly fine. So unfortunately, we weren't able to get this feature fully fleshed out in the backend, but ideally, what we would have wanted is that for a given user, so given their information and given their friend profiles, you could supply all that information to the backend, and the backend would be able to take that into consideration to process aliases. So for instance, maybe on Discord, I know casted by a particular username, but if I want to search something like when is Caston's birthday, then this is what the purpose of the friends profiles would be for. So without further ado, let's get to the meat and potatoes of the app. So let's go to start a new search. And for the sake of this live demo, we've prepared a list of questions that have reasonable answers, so nothing inappropriate. So I guess because we have quite a few, we're not going to be able to get through all of them, but does anyone from the audience wish to ask any of these questions? I know it might be a little bit hard because you don't have a conversation history, but trust that these are somewhat reasonable. Yes?
Can you ask what happened on the most recent?
So internally, I'm also crossing my fingers I didn't break something earlier, but because I should have saved the commit. Okay. So what happened on the most recent Friday?
What's the processing delay like if you?
So it's about
4 seconds.
I'd say it's more than 4 seconds.
It depends. So Krishna will probably touch on this a little bit, but it depends on keywords as well. For example, recent is one that will.
You should check code.
Yeah.
Oh, perfect.
Okay, so we have an answer. So the question was, what happened on the most recent Friday to emojis? On Friday, January 31st, 2025. For reference, the corpus is from, I actually don't know.
February 1st.
Well, that's the end date.
Yeah.
The start date is whenever the chat was started. So many years back, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah, on Friday, January 31st, and if you don't believe me, that's the Friday, relative to the start of the corpus, which is Saturday. Krishna Saxena finished his morning routine and planned to connect with his papa over Zoom. So our app allows you to view details, which provides the sources, again, for the query. And basically, details reiterate what the question and answer were. It tells you how our critic evaluated that particular response. So in this case, it said that our critic determined that the following response is decently grounded in truth. Truth be told, I haven't seen the critic read it worse than that, so I'm not sure if that's actually true or not. But I guess what's actually pretty cool is that if we take a look at snippets and bear in mind there could be multiple, we can, well, that's actually a curious one. Let's see if I can find, yeah. For example, snippet 4. Again, that's from WhatsApp, Palms and Homies, and we see that, yes, there are some messages here from the 31st. You'll also notice that there are other, I guess, snippets with messages from perhaps other dates, but this is just taking into consideration all of the messages that the LM considered. I guess maybe there's room for improvement to factor some of those snippets out, but for the time being, that's
So
what.
let's actually look at this snippets. Go back and highlight.
Yeah.
I want to see like if we can.
It's the
I want to like the snippet too.
Okay.
So let's try to construct a question based on this. What day soccer? Suppose that we move Friday soccer to winter quarter. I prefer 5 votes. So can we basically try to say how many votes were there for moving Friday soccer on Saturday or something? Let's see if it
Okay.
gets 8 votes.
Yeah. So let's, hopefully I remembered the question, but
How many people?
Yeah, I remember the context and have an appropriate question.
we're there.
We appreciate it.
Friday soccer to-
We put a lot of trust into providing, or Krishna provided us with a huge chat history.
Oh, this is your actual chat history?
Yeah, of everything. When we were testing this, we saw a
So
lot.
I know in a lot of like testing settings, you like auto-generate data. No, this is real data. Okay. There were 4 votes to move Friday soccer to Saturday, and there were 8 votes for being able to come on Saturday. There were 5 votes to keep
8
Sunday.
votes of being able to come on. Right.
And then it highlights it as well. So
Okay. And yes, the relevant context in this case was highlighted in this particular snippet.
Oh, nice.
Okay.
shout outs to Krishna for the highlighting.
Yes. So yes, this is
Anyone
rendering.
else wants to ask a question? Do you have any other context we can snippets of any other questions we can ask questions on?
Sure.
Any other questions?
Actually, is there? Well,
Oh, you should do the B-Day one.
oh,
Oh, what is Krishna's?
oh, yeah, that's a good. Yeah. Sorry. What is Krishna's birthday?
When is Krishna's birthday? Okay, let's see.
I mean, I think this will get the right answer. We'll find out. Well, yeah, let's find out.
So as you wait for this, where does it fail? Like, why is the score only 1.8 and not like more than 2?
So it failed on the dates one. If it parses a date incorrectly, then the filtering will just give an error. Because it.
Actually, pretty quick.
Oh, this is an interesting example. Krishna, would you like to
Oh,
explain?
yeah. So, one of my friends is a bit of a troll, and so there's a celebration in India called Krishna Janmashtami, which is a religious celebration. It occurs sometime in August. My actual birthday is April 26th, and so April 24th is like weird, but like also it could be people wishing from other time zones. So like, we'll see what's in the details.
So,
Wait, was it able to do in multiple languages here? I see
Um,
some languages here. I see Hindi here.
oh yeah, I'm not sure.
We weren't testing on multiple languages with queries, but
It does process, so it's using Google embeddings, so it's trained on multi-languages.
we tried a couple different embeddings.
I have a general question about like how is time handled? Is time handled in semantic way or based on the contents of the message or the metadata?
So time is handled by metadata.
Okay.
And also the LLM is getting all of these, like Wednesday, 24 April or whatnot.
I mean, like if some message says an event happened
Sure.
yesterday, for example,
Mhm.
would that be accounted?
Okay, so I'd say there are two different time steps when this comes into play. So first, when we're putting everything in the database, then time is being done by datetime, UUID. And then when we're when we're evaluating the documents again for accuracy or relevancy, it will have dates in such a format like Wednesday, et cetera, and afterwards the message will become. So if the LLM can parse this date as well as the word yesterday, then it should know based on.
Because running out of time, like, final way to breakers, not break. Can you ask a question like, what did Soham say? What is the last message from Soham?
I know for a fact that that will break, but
What was the last message from?
The word last seems to be an
let me-
issue.
Okay, what was
But-
the message? Maybe adapt it a bit.
Yeah, let me rephrase it, but then I'll demonstrate what happens when we use less. So the question was,
What was the most recent message from? I was looking at some of the names over there. Soham, S-O-H-A-M. S-O-H-A-M.
Okay, yeah. And so what's interesting about this, whenever we include the keyword recent, what it's doing is it's then looking at a chain where it will search from all messages from yesterday to today, were there any matches? Then in the last week to today, were there any matches? Or in the last like 2 weeks, last month.
Recent.
And so it will do this in a loop until the critic says that this is a useful answer.
Can I see the details?
yeah, my beautiful code.
He said the same thing to you as well. He called you a goat as well. So his goat is
Goat is very
Calling
lenient
everyone a goat,
among
so-
us.
All right, this is really good.
Yeah.
I think we need to move to the next one.
Okay.
Okay.
Really good progress.
Thank
you.